Hi everyone, from this video we are going to start the second unit of e-payment systems titled Automated Clearing and Settlement. In this unit we are going to learn about the various topics related to process of real-time gross settlement and the various processes involved in real-time gross settlement, net settlement and net settlement versus gross settlement, various networks related to ATM networks, Fedware, chips and shifts along with their functions. In this video we are going to learn the some of the topics related to the second unit, like process of real-time gross settlement, queuing arrangements, key components of centrally located queuing methods. The process of real-time gross settlement can be explained as a lag between the time at which information is made available to receiving banks and the time at which settlement takes place may have important risk implications in case of large funds transfer systems. Even in the RTGS environment, where both processing and final settlement are made in real time, several circumstances can be identified in which the treatment of payment message or the associated information could be a source of risk. This involves of four different types of real-time gross settlement, namely V-shaped, Y-shaped, L-shaped and T-shaped. Coming to the V-shaped, to initiate a funds transfer, the sending bank dispatches a payment message which is subsequently routed to the central bank and to the receiving bank as the system processes and settles the transfer. Arrangements for routing payment message is the majority of RTGS cases will be based on the so-called V-shaped message flow structure. In this structure, the full message with all information about the payment is initially passed to the central bank and is sent to the receiving bank only after the transfer has been settled by the central bank. And coming to the Y-shaped, in this case the payment message is transmitted by the sending bank to the central processor. The central processor takes a subset of information that is necessary for settlement from the original message and routes this core subset to the central bank. Upon receipt of the core subset, the central bank checks that the sending bank has sufficient covering funds on its account and informs the central processor about the status of the transfer. For example, queuing or settlement. Once settled, the full message containing the confirmation of settlement is rebuilt by the central processor and sent to the receiving bank. And coming to the L-shaped real-time gross settlement, an L-shaped structure which is conceptually similar to a Y-shaped structure. This configuration was chosen because it could be implemented by modifying rather than rewriting the software supporting the previous DNS arrangements. The payment message dispatched by the sending bank is held at a system gateway attached to the sending bank's internal process system, and a subset of information contained in a original message is sent to a central bank. If the sending bank has sufficient funds on its account, settlement is completed and the central bank sends back a confirmation message to the sending bank's gateway. Upon receipt of this confirmation, the original payment message will released automatically from the gateway of the sending bank and sent to the receiving bank. And coming to the last type of RTGS settlement is T-shaped. Here actually alternatively RTGS system could apply a T-shaped structure in which the sending bank routes payment message directly to the receiving bank, which is sent simultaneously to the central bank. This means that the receiving bank will first receive the full unsettled payment message immediately after the sending bank has dispatched it, and will subsequently receive a confirmation message from the central bank once settlement has been taken place. The T-shaped structure has generally been viewed as being incompatible with the basic principle of RTGS, that a funds transfer should be passed to a receiving bank if and only it has been settled unconditionally by the central bank. And coming to these real-time gross settlement queuing arrangements, broadly defined, queuing refers to an arrangement whereby funds transfer orders are held pending by the sending bank or by the system in a certain order, so as to prevent any limits set against the sending bank from being breached or manage liquidity more regularly or generally. In RTGS systems, queuing are most commonly generated when sending banks do not have sufficient covering funds in their central bank accounts. Queuing can also differ according to the management of the queuees, that is, how an individual bank's queue is controlled. The management may be carried out by the central bank or the centralized management, or by banks individually. Irrespective of whether the queues are physically located at the center or within bank's internal system, the management of queues could in principle be either centralized or decentralized. Combination of these possibilities in terms of the location and management can thus lead to various forms of queuing. Here, various key importance of centrally located queuing methods of queuing processes can be described as: to date, most centrally located queuing arrangements have adopted a form of FIFO, which can be full form of first in first out rule for queuing processing, where the FIFO rule is applied. Funds transfer orders are held in order in which they are dispatched by sending bank, and the payment at the top of the queue is released and settled when covering funds became available, and only then the payment behind in the queue considered for settlement. Some systems apply various or variations of the strict FIFO rules that can be explained as the queuing processes and reordering. Assuming bank A has a balance of 100 rupees, then sends 5 outgoing transaction orders in a sequence, namely T1, T2, T3, T4, T5. Here T represents the transaction. The transaction value of T1 is 40, T2 is 70, T3 is 20, T4 is 30, and T5 is 10. For simplicity, no incoming transactions or central bank intraday credit are available during the time under consideration. The process of the transferring depends upon the queuing method used. By assuming the above example, that a bank having a balance of 100 and started a transfer of 5 outgoing orders in the sequence of T1 to T5, which are the values of 40, 70, 20, 30 and 10 respectively, from T1 to T5. In the following FIFO method, the first transaction order, that is T1, is tested for cover and settled. However, the results balance of 20, that means we have assumed that 100 is the bank balance. The 40 is settled in the transaction 1 scenario. Here However, the resulting balance of 60 is insufficient to settle the second transaction T2. Here, consequently, T2 and all other transfers are queued in the FIFO method. The number of settled transactions is 1 and the settled value is 40. The next type of queuing process is bypass FIFO. T1 is settled, that is resulting the balance is 60. The T1 value is 40, so the balance is remaining is 60, and T2 is queued exactly as if the case of FIFO. The system will then bypass T2 because the T2 value is 70 but the bank balance is 60. Since it is too longer to settle with the remaining balance and the test T3 is covered. Since the balance of 60 is sufficient to settle T3, T3 will be settled because T3 is considered to be transfer of amount of 20 only, and the remaining balance will be the 40. That means the T1 will be value transferred is 40 and the T2 is bypassed in this case. That is because of the 60. Remaining the 100 will not be sufficient for settling the T2. The T3 is settled with the value of 20. By adding the T1 and T2, the total transaction has been made of 60. So here the resulting balance is 40. The next system will be returned to T2 to test the cover again. But T2 will still not be settled and will continue to be queued. However, if that assumption will be relaxed, T2 could be settled if the balance reached to 70 or more by time of retesting for cover. The system will bypass T2 again and test T4 for cover. T4 will be settled and T2 will be retested. This interaction process will continue enabling T5 also to be settled, leaving just T2 is queued. The number of settled transactions is 4 and the settled value is 100. Here the remaining, by assuming that the T1 and T3 are 60 and the T4 and T5 are 30 and 40 respectively, and by settling the T1 and T3, the total amount is transferred is 60 and the remaining 40 is sufficient for the transferring of transaction 4 and transaction 5. So it will bypass the transaction 2, that is 70 rupees, and it will transfer the settle the remaining amount which is sufficient to transfer the transaction 4 and the transaction 5, that is 30 and 10 respectively, with the total amount of remaining 40 from the deduction of T1 and T3. And next, coming to the FIFO with prioritization. Assume that bank A can prioritize the transfer according to two priority classes, that is high and low, at the time of input, with the FIFO rule applying with each priority. In case 1, bank A inputs T2 and T4 in the system as high priority transfer and inputs the other as low priorities. That is, T1 is settled even though it is a low priority, because being the first payment to be entered into the system, there are no other payments queued at that stage. The remaining balance of 60 is insufficient to settle the next payment, that is transaction 2, which is therefore queued. All remaining payments are therefore also queued because T2 is high priority. T3, T5 are low priority and will therefore not be settled, while any high priority payments are queued. And T4, although also high priority, is behind T2 in the FIFO high priority queue. The outcome therefore happens to be the same as with a simple FIFO queue with no priority facility. In the second case, bank A inputs T2 as low priority and all the others as high priority. Again, T1 settles and T2 is queued, leaving a balance of 60. However, balance T2 is low priority, high priority payments T3, T4 and T5 will be settled. In this case, the outcome therefore happens to be the same as with the bypass FIFO. And the last case can be discussed as taking the T4 is an high priority and the others are low priority. Again, T1 will be settles while T2 is queued because of insufficient balance and low priority. Low priority T3 will then also be queued behind T2, but high prioritized T4, that is value 30, can be settled with the balance of 60. Low priority T5 will also be queued behind T2 and T3. These cases therefore produces a different outcome. And coming to the next type of queue processing is FIFO with reordering. Assuming that the system center or same bank A can reorder the queues transfer under the FIFO rule. For example, if T2 is moved to the end of the queue, all other transactions, that is, or the transfers, that is T1, T3, T4, T5, except the T2, because it has moved to the end of the list, will be settled and only T2 will remain in the last. This reordering produce the same result as bypass FIFO and case 2 under FIFO with prioritization, which was described as above. And the last one of queues processing is revocability of queued transaction. Here, another important aspect of queuing is whether or not the sending bank can cancel queued transactions. End of the day, revocability typically applies automatically in RTGS system to those transfers that have failed to settle by the close of the system. Intraday revocability is in most cases not allowed, and in some others is restricted to exemptional circumstances such as input error. That means in this case the revocability of the queue transactions will be callbacked in the cases like input error related to the transfer amount or the beneficiary account details. Thank you.